They celebrated without me as if I was already gone. My own children, my grandchildren, smiled around a dinner table where my chair sat empty. Do you know what it feels like to see your whole family move on as if you don't matter? I gave them everything, raised them, fed them, even sold pieces of my jewelry to keep the lights on when times were hard. And now they had the nerve to act like I was too old, too weak, too useless to even invite. But I wasn't as fragile as they thought. They forgot one thing. I may be old, but I've lived long enough to know how to make people regret underestimating me. Let me tell you how I made sure they never forgot who I really was. The night I found out, I sat by my window with the lights off, watching their cars pull into my son's driveway. I could see shadows moving inside, laughter spilling out, the clinking of glasses. Not a single knock on my door, not a single call asking if I'd like to come. My heart felt heavy, but not from age, from betrayal. These were the same children I held when they cried, the same ones I worked double shifts for, sewing late at night just to buy them shoes for school. And now, they laughed together while I sat alone, forgotten like an old coat left in the attic. I wiped my tears, and that's when something inside me hardened. If they thought I was weak, I'd make sure my silence cut louder than any words ever could. I started small, watching, listening, and keeping notes in a little journal I hid under my mattress. They thought my old hands were too shaky to write, but every detail was recorded. Who borrowed money and never paid back? Who mocked me behind my back? Who only showed up when they needed something? My children thought I was just a frail grandma rocking in her chair, but I was studying them like a hawk. The turning point came when I overheard them arguing about my house, my own home, as if it were already theirs. They hadn't even buried me, yet they were dividing the walls and furniture. That night, I looked at the stack of envelopes I had hidden away, and I knew exactly how I'd flip their greed into their punishment. My plan had finally begun. I went to the bank the very next morning, moving slower than usual so no one would suspect a thing. The teller knew me well, and with a quiet smile, she helped me move my savings into a private account, one none of my children could touch. Then I contacted my lawyer, the one they all thought I'd fired years ago. We met in his office, and I laid out my plan. I rewrote my will, not with anger but with precision, every word designed to leave them stunned. Instead of handing everything to the ones who ignored me, I chose a different path. A scholarship fund in my name, donations to the church that never stopped checking on me, and a trust for my one granddaughter who never asked for a dime but always showed up with love. As I signed the papers, my heart raced not with fear, but with the thrill of knowing they'd never see this coming. The weeks that followed felt like a quiet storm building inside me. My children called less and less, assuming I would still be sitting here, desperate for scraps of their attention. But every day, I grew stronger, holding on to the secret like a weapon no one could see. I watched them brag on social media about vacations, new cars, and their perfect families, never once mentioning the woman who raised them. They thought I was weak, that I had nothing left but the empty rocking chair on my porch. What they didn't know was that the clock was ticking toward a day they'd never forget. Each ignored call, each forgotten visit, only made me more certain. When the truth came out, they would choke on their own pride. The day finally came when I invited them all over, pretending I wanted a simple family dinner. I cooked their favorite meals, laid the table with the good dishes, and even lit candles. They showed up late, as usual, laughing loudly and barely acknowledging me. I poured the wine, smiled politely, and listened as they talked about their own successes, never once asking about my health or my days. But I stayed calm, because this wasn't just dinner, it was the stage I had prepared for their reckoning. With every bite they took, with every careless laugh, I felt my heart pound harder. They thought it was just another evening with a fragile old woman they could ignore. They had no idea the script had already been flipped, and I was the one pulling the strings. I waited until the plates were nearly empty before I leaned back in my chair and dropped the folder on the table. The laughter stopped instantly. Inside were copies of my lawyer's documents, the new will I had drawn up without a single one of them included. Their forks froze mid-air as I told them every last cent, the house, the land, even the jewelry they used to fight over, would be donated to charities and scholarships for children who actually needed it. Their faces drained of color, eyes wide, mouths hanging open. They stammered, begged, and tried to play nice all at once. But I wasn't done. I looked each of them in the eye and said, "This is what happens when you treat family like a burden. I may be old, but I am not weak." They erupted like cornered animals. My daughter-in-law slammed her hand on the table, demanding I reconsider. her voice sharp with panic. My son tried to soften his tone, suddenly calling me mom with a sweetness he hadn't used in years. But I could see the fear behind his eyes. The grandkids looked at each other, stunned, realizing the luxuries they thought were guaranteed had just vanished. I sat there, calm, sipping my tea, letting their pleas crash against me like waves on a rock. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking under their judgment. Their desperation was almost pitiful, but deep down, I knew this was the only way to teach them the value of respect and the cost of betrayal. I stood up slowly, letting the silence linger, and looked each of them in the eye. "You left me out when I needed you most," I said, my voice steady. "So I made sure you'd feel what it's like to be left out too." The room was heavy, filled with the weight of their regret. They had thought I was weak, disposable, a burden they could ignore. But now, with one signature on a piece of paper, I had taken away everything they thought they controlled. I walked out of that room taller than I had in years, leaving them speechless, powerless, and finally forced to see me, not as a fragile old woman, but as the one who held the last word.